morning, everybody. Before we get started, I know this is going to be a long meeting, and I really appreciate everyone showing up. Debbie, sit down. You're freaking them out. Anyways, we do have snacks for those of you who did not get breakfast because we started so early, as well as coffee and hot tea. So get your snacks now, and your tea, and your coffee, and your water. Now. Really. Roseman?
Thank you. Testing.
All right, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Before we get started, again, thank you. We realize this is 10 o'clock on a Friday, and a lot of you had to take your time off from work. But this is a very important meeting for all of us, not just Jill and Michael, who's probably laying there crying. So I want to go ahead and get started. with Jeff Whitley. Sir, Whitney, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jeff Whitney.
This is Jeff Whitney. And then we're just going to pass it down.
Good morning. My name is Jeff Whitney. I am the director for the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. So I'm your state forester, and I'm also your state fire marshal. It's nice to be back in the community. I slept here several times during the Bullock and the Aspen and the Borough. Happy to be here.
Good morning, I'm Gail Griffin, and I have no voice. I'm your state senator, and I guess I've been talking too much at the Capitol. I have some cards here, I'll leave them here, and if you want to talk to me after the meeting, I'll be happy to meet with you. Thank you, it's good to be here.
She has a sore throat, she can't. Gail Griffin. Sorry.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Kavanaugh. I'm the Deputy Director of Economic Development with Pima County. And one of the things in my purview is the Pima County Small Business Commission. And we've been working closely with the business community of Summerhaven to address various concerns that they have. And obviously fire is right at the top. So glad to be here this morning.
All right, good morning. I'm Kerwin Dewberry. I'm the forest supervisor for the Coronado National Forest. This is just one of the areas that I help oversee as well and manage, and glad to be here today and look forward to a great productive meeting and seeing how we can improve things and move things forward.
Good morning. My name is Lucretia Free, and like many people here, I wear a couple of different hats. I'm a former chair of the Pima County Small Business Commission, and then I'm also the chair of the Mountain Subcommittee that we formed to work very closely with you guys, so I'm very happy to be here today. I also publish the Vale Voice and the Take a Verde Voice for a couple of community newspapers. And finally, I work for Supervisor Steve Christie in the Southeast region, which is like the Vale, sort of Rolling Bay, Tucson area. So that's another role that I play. So it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Miranda. I'm the Fire Management Officer for the Coronado National Forest, for the entire forest. And I'm also the Fire Management Officer for the Park Services, the Park Service lands here in Southeast Arizona. And I too, like Jeff, have spent some time on the hillsides out here. First time in my first experience was on the Bullock Fire with a hot shot crew, and I forget that one.
Good morning, I'm Beth Dykstra. I'm the Acting District Ranger on the Santa Catalina District, and I am very pleased to be here. It's a privilege to be part of your community. Spent a little bit of time during my detail hiking up here, so it's a beautiful area, and to completely understand the passion that you have for this.
Beth Borazon will be here, and she has worked with Steve Christie, and of course everyone knows.
Bob Zimmerman. I was past chairman of the fire district, and I own the sawmill across the street, which you're all going to be required to go over there and have dinner later.
Bill P. Ackowitz. I'm the resident farmer on top of the hill.
And I'm Jenny Zimmerman, Bob's daughter.
Steve Brigham, president of the Loma Sabino Homeowners Association, and past president of the Mount Lemmon Community Center. But most importantly, I'm married to Lindy Brigham, who cannot be here, who manages a lot of the communications in the battle for wiping out cheatgrass. So, great to be here.
Joe Gugno, Mountain and Fire. We have known I've been up here about 18 years. So. Newly appointed October.
I'm Sally Crum, Secretary of the Willow Canyon Homeowners Association, Secretary of the Mount Lemmon Homeowners Association, and the Firewise Committee Lead, as well as Firescape.
Hi, my name is Larry Waldron. I've been a cabin owner since 1986, and my background is in communications engineering, and I'm assisting the Firewise group here, trying to get a cell site.
Steve Hensel, retired Forest Service, longtime resident up here, and going back to the 70s, and know most of the people here. Worked with resources a lot and fire, and my wife Suzanne wrote the book, Look to the Mountains. Most of you are familiar with it.
I'm going to hit the light so we can see a little better. Wanted to show you some slides of what the mountain looked like back in the early 1900s and some slides of today. So here we go. Okay, if I could get this to work. I'll give it to Steve. Okay. Matt, oh Matt. Okay, this is
Don't get him excited.
okay. Can you hear me now? Too bad Verizon's not here. Okay, this is early in 1900, and you can see the tree spread behind there. This is up close to Summerhaven. Go to the next slide, please. This is a tennis match, and as you can see, Bob Zimmerman's on the donkey. But you also notice the tree spread. Okay, next shot. This is Summerhaven, and this is how Summerhaven looks in a healthy forest. Next slide. This is today. Next slide. Again. Next slide. Next slide. This is firemen working a fire in 1915. Next slide. This is a fire in 2003. There's a dramatic difference between a healthy forest and an unhealthy forest. And now I'm going to introduce Bob, the old timer, and let him talk about history. Nobody gets to fall asleep.
My comments are based on my village experience as chairman of the Mount Lemmon Fire District for 24 years. I built the buildings up there. I got the Forest Service to give me permission to build up there, which was very kind of them. I was raised on the mountain after graduating from U of A, after which I joined the Air Force, and after I returned from Vietnam, I came back here in the early 70s and took over some businesses. What's fascinating to me is the history of the Western Pine Forest. Prior to 1900, as we were looking at the pictures, forests had low tree densities and were healthy. They were open and park-like. There was approximately 90 trees per acre. The reason for all this was ground fires started by lightning and Indians. And the people felt that the mountains were always on fire. There was no active fire suppression as the fires cleaned out the mountains. Fire heights were typically 2 to 4 feet, temperatures were low intensity. The ground fires removed shrubs and small trees. The good pines dropped their lower branches, as you can see, of the big pine trees outside, and which removed what is called ladder fuel. Ladder fuel is a fuel arrangement allowing ground fires to go into the crown. I know many of you know this much better than I do, but some in here don't. Trees seem to adopt ground fires. They had developed thick bark to protect the cambium layer during the small fires, and they sometimes release pine nuts. The forest trees were healthy trees. They had adequate water supply, nutrients, and good spacing, providing adequate sunlight. This protected trees from another major threat, which are beetles. Once the pine beetle bored through the tree bark, they were drowned by an abundant supply of tree sap from a healthy tree. Ground fires moved so slowly that animals and birds could get away, and they weren't destroyed. Springs and streams flowed healthily. After 1900, there was government rules which only allowed putting out fires. No thinning was funded or allowed. This caused tree densities to increase to as much as 800 to 1,200 trees per acre, which is 10 times more than it should be. Shrubs were allowed to fill in. This created ladder fuel, causing crown fires which destroyed forests. Crown fires created very high winds, carried embers in advance, moved faster than animals. Flame lengths were measured in hundreds of feet. Ambient temperatures were extremely high, like in the Aspen fire. A lot of the cabins exploded internally before the fire reached them. And there was no species protection in protected areas because they burned and they couldn't get away. Unfortunately, it also encouraged the growth of wrong trees which had lower branches, which again caused crown fires. Streams and springs were suffering, they didn't have enough water, and beetles. Turns out that beetles was a major killer of trees, just like crown fires. And that was because the trees were competing with each other, and they were not healthy. And so when the beetles bored through the bark, they could kill the tree. And one year I remember hearing from state land that more trees were destroyed by beetles than by wildfires. And that was over near Prescott. My mountain and fire experiences when I was chairman, so we had an agreement with the Forest Service that we could go out and attack fires, and we would get there in a few minutes. The Forest Service did not have the budget to keep fire crews up here. That was a problem. So we were always there, and we went out and put out a lot of fires before they got away. And we also watched the people and made sure they weren't starting fires that they shouldn't be. And if the fire was big enough and it took a while, then when the Forest Service showed up with the firefighters, they took over. This was a great benefit to the mountain. And the expense of this, by the way, is paid for by the village people who pay their taxes. About 85% of the fire district's activity is involved with activities on the Forest Service. Not all of them is fighting fires, but we, of course, saved a lot of people on the road, hikers, and all kinds of different things. But we were out there watching the fires and watching the people, because people are also a danger. The Bullock Fire started on the very eastern edge of the mountain and went along the north edge. When it got to Soldiers Camp, it was just about 2 miles away from the village, and we thought that since the Forest Service was putting sprinklers and things on the cabins that they had over there that were renting, and when it got to here, we were told we had to deal with our own. And we panicked because we didn't have the equipment to do what was needed to be done, which is spread several hundred feet of a matrix of fire hoses and sprinklers and that kind of stuff. Fortunately, a whole bunch of materials that we needed showed up in boxes. And so we got out and put it all out. And that was supplied by the Forest Service, which we were very thankful of. We were just a little critical of the policy that was being enforced. The Aspen fire came in 2003, and it came from over that hillside over there, which was upwind from the village. We had learned in the newspapers that the most dangerous place for the fire to start was where it started, by humans. And again, as I said, the ambient temperature in the village was so high that many cabins started on fire internally before the fire even reached them. We lost 300 plus cabins and businesses. We needed defensible spaces, we needed thinning. It was something I had requested many times of the Forest Service. However, they just didn't have the budget to do it. So they concentrated on thinning around Mount Bigelow and protecting those towers and one things up there, which is about all they could get done because of their budget, which is crazy. In the early days, back in the 50s and 40s, we had a very close relationship with the Forest Service. Right here in this area right here where the inn stood, we had dances every Saturday, and the Forest Service showed up and dated the young girls. And for some reason he liked them.
Was that help or hazard?
That was good. And the guy who called the fire was the ranger. Called the dance, the square dance was the ranger. We also were active in thinning. My parents had a sawmill at that time, and we thinned around areas where people were concentrating. The Forest Service marked the trees. We estimated how many feet per minute, and we pot them. And we also thinned around cabins on the forest and in a lot of areas, which was a good thing. And that was the second sawmill that was up here. There was one in the 30s also. We felt we did a good thing, but it was decided that it was bad to cut trees down, so that was stopped. I am so excited about what's happening right now because I have not seen this happen for years and years and years, and I'm very hopeful that we will work together. I feel the first thing we should do is get Congress to appropriate funds to be only used for forest thinning. Funds can't be used for anything else. Change the rules that all areas can be thinned mechanically, because thinning a protected forest with hand tools is extremely slow and extremely inefficient. And it's necessary to get done as this is being done in Europe. There will be a temporary increase in forest fire costs because we have to fight the wildfires and also do the thinning. But in the future, it will come back to a healthy relationship and we will have a much lower cost. I think the most important thing that can happen in the village and the mountain is an improved relationship between the Forest Service, the village, the county, and the state. So we all work together to try to solve the problems facing this community. We own about 350 acres here in private land, and we're in a critical area in Sabino Canyon and Carter Canyon, so we need to be goodly involved with each other to work this out. I hope that happens. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this meeting, and hopefully it'll be a start of a relationship that will change the mountain in a positive manner. I have learned so much in the last 4 or 5 weeks that I'm almost shocked. Back in 2003, when we lost our home to the fire, human nature always looks for somebody to blame when they're going through trauma. And the first thing that came to my mind was blaming the Forest Service for the fire. And I apologize for that, because it's not the case. The Forest Service at this point in time is understaffed and underfunded. And I just can't, my head goes off to you, because you go through school and you want to do something noble and protect the forest. You want to be able to go ahead and have other people enjoy the forest also. But what has happened, because of the condition of the forest and it's unhealthy, you've gone from being a manager to a fireman. And so not only are you working for five different people because you're understaffed, you have people pointing fingers at you. And I was one of those people, and I apologize for that. That being said, I ran some analysis as far as, what fire suppression really costs. And all the literature seen so far is mostly on suppression. That bigger microphone works better. Okay. As far as testing. Oh, testing. Now it's back. So anyway, I tried to run an analysis of what the total cost of fires are. There's very limited data as far as the percentage of suppression versus the direct costs and indirect costs due to the fire. The direct costs, of course, being the loss of buildings and a variety of things, and the rehabilitation cost is rebuilding the town or rebuilding the businesses and reforestation. And so the percent of suppression range anywhere from 5% to over 50%. So I took an average, adding them all up, and I came to about 15 to 20% are the normal suppression costs in a major fire. So I went ahead and took that, and also the direct cost at 40%, and then the rehabilitation cost at 45%. So next slide, please. So I took the Rodeo Chudesky fire of 2002, and their suppression cost was $46 million. Their other direct cost was $122 million. Rehab cost was $139 million, of course the total being $308, and 462,000 acres destroyed. So based on those percentages, I ran an analysis of what, from the published information on suppression, just to kind of get some sort of fix what the total cost, and this is not even talking about the loss of life, which is more important than any dollars amount that's on that board right now. But go to the next slide, please. 10-year average total expenses ranges anywhere from $107 to $113 billion, and that's the total cost, not only suppression cost, but the loss of buildings and rehab. So we're looking at it at just a huge dollar amount of lost property. Again, the lives lost is more important than anything, but the total picture shows you that we have a range from $107 to $113 billion over the last 10 years. So you're averaging, 10 to $11 billion a year in total losses. And again, it's not your fault, it's Washington, D.C.'s fault. And I'll explain that in the next slide. History of catastrophic fires. Again, there's not a lot of data out there as far as, for example, from 1805 to 1910, there weren't that many people out in the wilderness, and fires were limited. But if you'll see here, there's a pattern, and that is the first 105 years, you only had 10 recorded catastrophic fires, and then the second 97 years, you had 37 recorded fires. So, also looking at 2003 at the bottom, you had 4 catastrophic fires that year. The year before that, 3. The year before that, 2. If you look at the range from 1910, there's a larger spread between the catastrophic fires. So that gives you an indication of the health of the forest as it goes through the different years. Next slide, please. I looked at the federal policies, and it just blew me away. They had, quote, the blank check policy for 69 years. That was from 1908 to 1950. 1923 to 1950, they had the fire exclusion crusade, and that lasted 27 years. From 1935 to 1977, the federal 10 a.m. policy. And let me explain what the 10 a.m. policy was. It just amazes me. Washington, D.C. dictated that the Forest Service should, when they see a fire, have that fire under control the next day by 10 a.m. So I think Washington, D.C. is not quite understanding the problem we have out in the field. That lasted for 42 years. It's just, it amazes me. You look at the federal bailout of $280 million for the KV fund. The KV fund is the reforestation fund. And of course, the Forest Service keeps borrowing from the KV fund, and then they, at the end of the year, they get a check from the government to go ahead and replenish that RV fund. And again, it's gotten to the point where you have to go ahead and put off the catastrophic fires now. But through the years, this action of the government stepping in and throwing money at it, and throwing money at it, and throwing money at it, added to the problem. The forest finally is just very unhealthy right now, and your backs are against the wall. I don't see how possibly you can do your jobs. The next few slides will show you what actually happens. Now this gives you a chart of the different activities from 1905 all the way up to 2020. Notice in 1923, the urbanites, and they called them urbanites, dictate from DC, stop all fires. Now historically, these people that lived in the city suffered through the Chicago fire and the Boston fire previous to that. So they had a real fear of fire. But they had no idea what the forest was about. A natural forest always has fires on a continuing basis. The basic rule of thumb is every 5 acres within 5 years gets hit by lightning, and there's a ground fire that clears out all the debris. And that was before 1910. Also, farmers burned their fields in the fall because it got rid of the parasites and it put nutrition in the ground. So this was a standard practice. Even the government at that point in time had their own researchers telling them that controlled burns were better for the forest, and Congress ignored them. And they started out with the Forest Fires Emergency Act in 1908, and then we had the big blowout, which was Idaho, Montana. And that reinforced their feeling that all fires need to be extinguished. And by doing that, we now face, all in the western states, unhealthy forests. And this money that's being spent, and it has to be spent until we get control of our forests, is taking away the money from the Forest Service to do their job. And their job is forest management. It's not firemen. If anybody has any questions about this, they can go ahead and raise their hand and ask. But you look at 1977, the 10 a.m. policy was still in as a function of the Forest Service. How much money does that mean that you have to put out a fire in 24 hours, or at least control a fire in 24 hours? It just amazes me that Washington, D.C. is totally out of touch. And they still are. Go to the next slide, please. Here's what has happened in 1995 to the projected 2025. 1995, your job of management was 84%. Your job of putting out fires was 16%. 2015, as you can see, it's almost 50-50. 48% is involved in management, 52% is putting out fires. I know somebody that was here as a fire ranger and left. His last statement before he left was, I wanted to be a manager, I didn't want to be a firefighter. And that says volumes to me. In 2025, as you can see, they're projecting 67% on fire and suppression, 33% on management. Next slide, please. So basically what you're looking at, a 10-year average cost of fire suppression, it's going through the roof. It's getting more and more expensive to put out fires. Next slide, please. To give you an idea, in 1995, the National Forest System, as far as funding, 58% was dedicated to management. By 2015, 29% was dedicated to management, whereas the wildfire management was 16% back in 1995. Now it's 52%. It's eating you alive. Next slide, please. Here's your employment statistics. Back in the day, in 1998, you had almost 18,000 employees that strictly were involved in management of the forest. And I'll get into what those, what management of the forest really entails. By 2015, you're down to a little over 10,000, but look at the change in the fire responsibility. You had a little over 5,000 in 1998, now you're up well over 12,000, or not 12,000, close to 12,000 in 2015. It's a dramatic change in the Forest Service system. You're not managing anymore. You're wearing yellow and going out and fighting fires. That's it. That's what you're doing. You do not have the personnel or the money to do your job. Your job is to manage the forest. Next slide. Land management, dropping 64%. That is dramatic, and you can't sustain what you're doing now. The federal policies you cannot sustain, because first of all, you're going to lose more land, more property, and more lives, and you're just flushing money down the toilet. And it's not right. It's not right for the American people, and it's not right for the Forest Service. You're handcuffed, and it's time that we turn things around. Next slide. Inventory monitoring, 35% reduction. Next slide. Here's what it looks like. Congress in Washington, D.C., which I think probably never stepped a foot in the forest, are crushing us with money, with no direction. And we're trying to get a healthy forest, and it's not happening. It's a losing battle until that changes, until we have our own responsible regional effort to thin the forests and make them healthy again. And that's a coalition between all parties to work together, because what happens in looking at just a state, every region is different. The topography is different, the weather is different, the usage is different, and the number of people associated with the forest, they're all different. So when you have one just straight law covering all the western states, it's not helping the people or the forest. You have to regionalize the laws and have a productive collaboration between all entities to make a healthy forest. And that's the only way we're going to survive. Thank you.
Again, Joe Gunia, Mountain Fire. Bill's, give me some slides here. That's kind of what we're dealing with, you know, oh my God, extreme forest conditions, and us sitting in the middle here, with little tools, you know, to try to facilitate keeping people from doing it. You know, we have a patrol program with our volunteers, you know, they go around to the campsites, make sure people put their fires out when they're done, you know, to try to mitigate that. So, let's see what we got next.
These are the volunteers on the bottom, and that's Joe.
Yeah. Because, you know, we get this. We got signs all over the place, but you know, we still have the public coming in and, you know, start a fire during restrictions. And I don't know if the fines aren't high enough to scare them. You know, I think they figured out how to get away with it. But you talk to our volunteers, and you know they'll find 6 to 12 each time they go out and patrol of unattended campfires. You know, either at a root site or just out in the wilderness or in the forest. We just had one that there's a rock. They had one built up on top of this rock, and up here in the middle. So you have to hike up there and put it out. that's what we kind of just talked about, you know, that we just don't think, you know, throwing the cigarette out, you know, you go down the highway, trucks are starting fires, hot breaks, you know, cigarettes. Any highway you go in Arizona, you can see it. So, you know, it's happening everywhere. So.
Some of you aren't aware exactly where mountain fire, how far down we go, or what our boundaries are. Joe?
Well, we do have an agreement with the state, so we have our district 12.5 square miles. So we take care of all the private land in that, but then we have an agreement with the state that if something starts, you know, nearby on the forest, or state land, we're the closest resource. We have something available. We'll send something out, and you know, help with that. And alongside of that, with the Forest Service, you know, we respond to their area and we give them an update, and then they make a decision. You know, whether they're going to send people up, assign us to the fire, we stay and play, or we turn it over to them. So that all kind of works with our volunteers, along with them. You know, we work closely with the guys up here. So you know, I think we're in the right direction. So, but along with that, we got our Firewise program, which everybody knows about. Sally took over that just recently. She's revamping that, you know, reorganizing it. We're also part of the Ready, Set, Go program, which works hand in hand with the Firewise. So, you know, we got programs out there. We'll assess properties, let the public, like we're talking about, you know, not knowing what needs to be done on your property as well. So you come by the station, have one of the guys go out, we'll do an assessment, tell you what you need to do. It's right there on paper. And then we're working on getting resources in the community to actually do the work that you can't do yourself. So I don't know if you want to add to the Firewise.
Well, man, not yet. We do have a little presentation that Joe's willing to do outside. Before we start that presentation, did everybody get the Firewise letter? Okay. And do you all feel comfortable that your property is fire safe? Because we've only gotten one person that actually has called the fire station to see if Joe can come by.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're aware of it, but they're not all over there saving lives right now. So when you leave, feel free to stop by the station and say, hey, can you come by? That's what Mountain Fire is here. We're here for you guys. Fee simple property, we understand that you guys have the right to keep your properties what you want, but you've got to think about your cabin and your neighbors. So if your cabin's not safe, then neither is your neighbor's. Got it?
Remember, it's going to take you guys. The district has no authority. We can't make you do it.
So you all know that. Like they can't, if you're fee simple, they can't come and say, put your fire out. But if we're starting fires here in Summerhaven, shame on us. Okay? So Joe's going to do a little presentation, and then Steve is. And after the presentation, if you want to get a water, use the restroom, do it now before we start back with Steve. And then we'll grab some extra chairs for the folks that came in late. Okay?
Yeah, we're just going to do a little demonstration of the bucket out here, but we got a training going on at the station at the same time, so that's Steve on this.
Okay, is this still the best mic to use? When Bill asked me to do this part of the presentation, that they're cutting out. I reminded them that there are at least 3 other Steves in this room that should do this presentation, because I'm not an expert in this. But I'm going to try to give you an overview from a citizen's perspective. So, great. So that's what a fire looks like, obviously. Next. There's a lot of literature out there that Bill tapped into that did a remarkable job of telling us about what the difference is between suppression and prevention. A lot of literature that suppression is just not working. The last bullet here is, again, about the issue that there's a lot of money, evidently, for suppression, but not that much for prevention. Next slide. I want to make sure that we all understand that this is not about cabins. All of us are cabin owners, but this is really about a much broader perspective about this mountain. So I want to emphasize that. Certainly when we talk about suppression, we want our cabins saved. When that fire is roaring up the mountainside, we're thankful that the Forest Service is there to help save our cabins. But it's much more than that. We have critical watershed up Turkey Run, Sabino Creek. Next slide. We have critical communication systems. Millions of dollars are spent on communications systems up there that the county knows more about than I do, but it's important for us to remember that. Next slide. World-class astronomy sites. Thankfully, there's been some mitigation measures and some work around the Mount Bigelow site, but there's probably a lot more that could be done. It's a popular destination. This is our reward, but it's also our risk. We're attracting, I think, when I was working on the Mount Lemmon Community Center, the county may know this better than I, but I think we're attracting about 1 million people up this mountain every year. A lot of people are coming up here. This is the map of Summerhaven, and I'm going to give, again, a citizen's perspective of where we are at risk. This should be done for the other communities, Soldiers Camp, Fern Ridge, all the other communities up here, but this is just a limited perspective of areas that I identified that I'm sure others could do a better job with. But the way to look at this, I've identified 6 areas that are essentially downhill from Summerhaven that put us at risk. So I wanted to just run through a couple of quick slides. So next, please. This is from Catalina Highway, looking up at Sabino, Loma Sabino Pines, and a lot of fuel there. Fuel that Loma Sabino can't touch. And as there's a note down here, I'm with Loma Sabino HOA. We spend 30% of our budget, our annual budget, on forest stewardship and fire-wise measures. But we can't touch this. So this is an area of risk and concern. Next slide. Again, from Catalina Highway, looking up at Loma Sabino. Yes, I have a few Loma Sabino slides here. I apologize for that. Going down Sabino Canyon Parkway, south of Summerhaven, downhill from Summerhaven, a lot of fuels down there. Next slide. Again, at the entrance to the Marshall Gulch area, I know that there's a project going on for Marshall Gulch. I apologize, I don't know if that work covers this, but perhaps we can get a little more specifics on that. Next slide. Again, Marshall Gulch, entrance below the Loma Sabino Pines subdivision. Next slide. And then in Marshall Gulch, a lot of vegetation, very popular area, a lot of matches get lit in this area, a lot of concern. It is putting all of us at risk here if we don't take care of this. Next slide. Obviously, we cannot afford as a community another catastrophic fire. We know the news, we know about climate change and everything else. These are slides from Aspen Fire. Many of you lived through this. This was horrific. We had another one. I would suggest we're probably not going to have a village. Next slide. I'd be remiss if I didn't have a slide of where we are 15 years after the Aspen Fire. There's been a lot of rebuilding, but guess what? It takes a long time to grow a tree. When I recently retired from Banner Health, I had a lot of Phoenix people coming to Tucson asking what to see, where to go. When they come up here, they are shocked at the appearance of this village. Just shocked. And we just can't afford to not take care of this place. Next slide. This is probably my most important slide. It's my last slide. And it talks about the work that we need to do together, not just between the Forest Service, the county, and state, but also communicating back to our community. We don't always know what's going on. And the great thing about this meeting here and the work that Jenny and Bill have brought to this meeting is that this could be the start of a whole new relationship. And I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So, everyone, we do have a little demo out here. If you want to go and watch, Joe's going to start fire. It's right there. So if you need to use the restroom as well and get some water, feel free.
marshmallows? The hot dogs are coming out today.
We used to do that for some parts of
Oh, really? Oh, that's fine. Did you take off the login for the Wi-Fi? Okay. Okay. Because I was like, oh no, I'm not connected. They're alone in the store. My parents are out of town. Okay.
Are they out RVing?
No, they went and saw Tanner, and then they're at the Denver gift shop.
Oh,
so they're buying it. Yeah. They get home late tonight. Yeah.
Where are you going? There, for the rest of Notice the
Say, Matt, I'm Gene Kinghorn with the Shrine. Or sometime we need to get up there and take a look at getting it connected.
Did you have the conduit run between the shrine and the house?
Yeah, or to the house conduit.
Just between the buildings?
I've got it running to the chapel, and if it's running over there, I can easily run another one to the house.
If you run one to the house, then when your satellite contract's up, we'll be able to connect you into the dish that we'll put on the shrine.
So we just need the other contract to be done before we talk about it. Okay.
I heard you've been talking to Greg Luther.
Yes. You needed a conduit, huh?
All right. Let's go ahead and get seated, everybody, because everybody only wants this 2 hours, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and have a seat so we can get this over with. Well, I mean, keep this moving. Sorry, I'm not trying to be bossy, but I know that everyone wants this done in 2 hours. So everyone got to use the restroom, and everyone got a snack and some water. And then we do need to introduce Beth Borazon came in. Everybody knows Beth?
Good morning. Sorry I was held up. Good morning all. So good to see you.
Okay, and everyone else that came in late did get chairs. I brought some extra chairs out. So there are chairs up here, Mrs. Riley, Carol. We're all good? We're ready to continue with this lovely progress of working together. Where's Sally? Copy. I'll smack you. Smack this woman. So what do you...
You're not bossy. You're a mother. Sometimes it feels like it. Okay, immediate needs to protect Summerhaven. The number one need is public awareness. I'm sorry that the media didn't show up. We sent all sorts of emails to the media, and I guess they have more important things to do this morning. But public awareness through media resources, probably the number one need immediately right now. People need to understand and know flicking a cigarette butt is not a good thing. Lighting a campfire and walking away from it is not a good thing. What the damage it can do to life and property is not a good thing. And we need to sit down with the media resources and put together a plan to go ahead and have them all talk about the dangers of the mountain, especially since we're in a drought. Thank God for the rain we had a few weeks ago. Thank God for the snow that's coming now. But in May and June, we may be still looking at a very severe drought and fire potential like we've never seen before. So we can take a breath for over these next few weeks, but what's going to happen in May and June, we have no idea. And that's where we need to be vigilant and get the media on our side to go ahead and tell everyone, including the Spanish channels, what the dangers are. Number two, hotshots on site at Palisades. Right now we don't need them, but we may need them in May and June, and that needs to be planned for and in operation before we hit the dry spell again. Also a drop-down zone. When the drop-down zone is to protect Summerhaven as a whole. If we, especially with the Marshall Gulch project, which Kerwin's going to talk about a little later. Increased vehicle night patrols. When I found out that the Forest Service has one, what would you call him, a law enforcement or what? Okay. He has to cover, what, the entire Catalinas? So the situation, and again, it's a money situation. We need to find you some money so you can get 3 or 4 of these guys on the road at night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and Monday. That's when the campfires are. That's when people are walking away from their campfires. So we need to coordinate something there so we have coverage. And include the firefighters, include the sheriff's department, whatever we need to do to go ahead and curtail this craziness of leaving fires alone. And that's public education also. And stiffer fines. Not just a slap on the wrist, something that's going to really make an impact. Smokey the Bear at the base of the mountain. He needs to be bilingual. Sorry. Heavy fines, the campfires, I mentioned that, barbecues and cigarettes. I'll tell you a story. This amazes me. My wife and I were coming away from church. It was probably about 9:30 at night, and Molino Basin, first of all, it was last year, and we were under fire restrictions. And you know the little barbecue pits they have all over the mountain. There was a car parked, and 2 of the barbecue pits had flames coming out of them, 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot in height. We're going, what in the heck is going on? So we stop the car and we pull in, and they're just pulling away. They're just leaving, kids, with these fires blazing. So we pull the car and block them. And they didn't like that too much. We called the fire department. The rural fire department came and put out the fires. But you've got crazies out there. And we need more patrols and we need more education. My wife and I feel that they actually set those fires to try and start a fire in Molino Basin. Why else would they do it? So, quicker response time with restrictions, bilingual information bulletins at the base of the mountain. You know, where, what is that, mile marker, what is that? 5? When we are getting in fire restrictions, and it's desperate up here and it's a drought, no cigarette signs from Jenny, no smoking, again, heavy fines, but we need to educate the people. And it's a perfect place at mile marker 5 to hand out bulletins to the people coming up the mountain and show them that, hey, we're in danger right now. We need your cooperation. And hopefully that could be part of it. And that's it. Any comments?
My comment is, when we are in a dry drip, try not to go crazy. I've literally watched some of you people just belligerently, I myself, screaming at people because they're smoking. These people have no clue. No clue. When they get out of their car and they're smoking, they don't understand stage 2, level 2. They don't know that. So try not to lose it come summertime when we are drier than we are now. And because if you have to call Dave because you just beat someone up because they're smoking a cigarette, you're going to be the bad guy. Yeah, no, I'm being serious because I've seen it. I've watched people literally, screaming it, and that doesn't make us look good. It makes us look like we're a bunch of crazies. So, but we don't want to be. Okay, next slide. Kerwin, I'm going to bring you this. And this is Kerwin Dewberry.
This is the next slide.
No, I won't. Okay, thank you. Hey, welcome everyone once again, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to talk a little bit about the things that we have going on and what we have planned for the community up on Mount Lemmon, and briefly about the Catalina Rincon Fire Escape Project. We had a very robust meeting about a month ago about this project, and inside of this project we have Marshall Gulch planning area. So Bill, I want to thank you as well for allowing the Forest Service to come up and be a part of this. We are within the community as well. You said some very touching things earlier, and I really appreciate that. Your words, don't have to apologize. We definitely in this together. We want to move things forward. Your facts that you showed earlier, they're right on, and I do want to say some words of encouragement that we glad that the senator is here as well, and Jeff. We do partner in so many different ways. Forest Service is definitely the executive side of things, so we implement the policies that come forth through the legislative side of things, and looking for those policies to continue. And as we can increase funds, hey, we'll execute on the ground. So we want to continue to do that with you, not just by ourselves. So just to narrow things down, we do have a project here. We're going to leave some of these maps, right, as it relates to what the Catalina Rincon fire escape is all about. There are various treatments that's going to go on. Real briefly, the project itself is not ready to implement. It is in the objection stage. We're hoping that we don't get any objections. At this current time, we do not have any. And it ends March 12th. That is good news. That is very good news. And if we don't have any, we can implement 5 days afterwards, and Marshall Gulch is going to be one of the first project areas we'll start doing project work in. If we do get an objection, I'm not going to give you guys the names because I don't want to protect them folks. Right. But then it could possibly delay implementation until May. But we're going to stay positive and look at sometime in March we'll start doing some implementation work. Marshall Gulch is about 360 acres of work that has planned. I'll try to move up here just a tad bit. This is primarily the area right here that we'll be looking at. This getting work done within the short-term time frame. And then this area up here is another planned area we'll be looking at next. Although this is the 360 acres that we'll be looking at, this area here is called Summerhaven Northwest, but it's mostly the Turkey Run. So just so you have an idea visually where things are on the ground. The implementation work that we're planning is thinning and burning. So you saw pictures earlier that was from Steve's presentation, but that is what we plan to do is get thinning and burning down within those areas. And again, it is primarily designed so that we are reducing catastrophic fires and reducing safety concerns for our firefighters and public so that we can get in there and start doing actions associated with these fires. Fires normally get big, cost usually goes up because of the amount of infrastructure that's in our areas now, and as well as when we have dense forested areas, it is unsafe to put certain people or to put people in there. So we have to bag up into areas that are a lot more safer to start doing suppression tactics or taking action against the fire. So those are I think that's the bottom line. I just wanted to share with you guys today is that Marshall Gulch is definitely on the forefront of us. We have a lot more planning areas associated with the Catalina Rincon project. It does cover the whole Catalina Ranger District. So the project itself is about 265 acres, so we cover the whole forest. But right now we're only focusing on these 360 acres that has the highest probability of the highest impacts, and I think we can have the highest probability of success with suppressing fires by treating this area first. Okay. All right. Any questions for me?
If you have questions for Kerwin, we're going to do it at the end. Sorry, remember you all wanted this to be 2 hours. And we're here just to get information, and then we'll go from there. Here's Sally.
So thanks, Kerwin. A small committee, a fire escape committee that we formed last August after the Borough fire began meeting with Ken Bourne, our previous ranger, and we're very thrilled to see this actually coming to fruition. We have our fingers crossed that we will get through March 12th without any objection.
And I'll just say one other thing, and I apologize for that, is that we do have funds internally and with our external partners, with Jeff, to start some of this implementation. It's not enough to complete the whole thing, but hey, we're starting early. So we're planning early, we're starting early, and the more partnerships we can bond together with and get things prepped and ready financially, it helps us move things forward. So we do have some money set aside right now, but it's not going to be enough.
So also on that note, the committee, we've been working with Veronica and Holly with the Forest Service. She's the community partnership person, and we actually had a meeting scheduled for next week to build this coalition that Bill is speaking about with our, besides just us, we have many people and organizations that love this mountain and care about it. We have the bicyclists, we have the Audubon Society, and we're going to be working with our government agencies to pull together a coalition to help us raise funding as well and community interest in protecting the forest. And then before I start into Firewise, since Beth is here, one of the things we're working on with Firewise is absentee ownership. We have a lot of, up here in Summerhaven on the privately owned property, we have a lot of lots that nobody takes care of, people don't come here, or they were lots that maybe haven't been rebuilt, and we have the same type of overgrowth in private lots that we're talking about in the forest. So we've begun working with Pima County on the possibility of developing some sort of Firewise ordinance that would allow the county to step in with either fines or liens or something that would help us clean up around the private areas. And Beth was tied up yesterday and wasn't able to give us an update at the Firewise meeting, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but could you bring us up to date?
Of course, happy to. In doing some research, we found Gila County has an ordinance called Clean and Lean, and it's a program where they go in, they assess that a property needs to be cleaned up, they notify the owner, they're given a period of time to clean it up, and if they don't, the county goes in, cleans it up, and puts a lien on the property. Currently, our County Development Services is reviewing that ordinance. They seem to think we have something in place that he was going to email to me, which I haven't received yet, called Title 7.33, something along the same lines. As always, it's an issue of funding such a program initially. They're reviewing the matter right now with attorneys. I'm saying it's a public safety issue because of the precious community up here. I want it to be a priority. They, of course, say, well, if it's a countywide thing and we're enforcing it, have you ever been to Avra Valley? As well, no, but how often is Avra Valley threatened by fire? So I am staying on it. That's the status right now.
We want to thank Beth for her support. She's been very active in working with us up here in the community to connect us with other groups that can help us. So as the new Firewise Committee Chairman, first of all, I want to thank all of you who have volunteered to help with the committee, and I want to thank Glenn and Ann who started this and have worked on it for many years. I appreciate everything you've done previously, and we are getting ready to launch our activities this year. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Firewise is a national organization. You can see our sponsors there, the Forest Service, USDA. It's part of the National Fire Prevention Association. Again, this is our theme for the, it's not if, but when. Fire is a part of the ecosystem. So our job with Firewise, we're talking about the Forest Service and what they need to do and what they can do to help us. Firewise is about what you need to do to protect your homes. So we're talking about the ember threat in the home ignition zone. So we're talking the 30 feet around to create a defensible zone. Next slide. I just want to be really quick and tell you, these don't show up very well, do they? So as Joe mentioned, March is the time to reach out, contact the fire department, and arrange for a home assessment. You may think your home is protected, but the information I got after the Borough fire from the volunteers and the people that were up here was that we were maybe 10% of the residences up here were truly Firewise. So you may think you're good, but let's have the professional come out and help us. We're developing neighborhood captains. We're going to provide training for them so that they'll actually be able to come out and do home assessments as well. And they will be reaching out to you as you're around them and help to get the collaboration going. And then in May, we're celebrating Wildfire Community Preparedness Day on May 5th, where we got a quote on working with Arizona Forestry, getting a DOC crew up here, a 20-man crew, who are going to bring their chipper, and we'll have people available. The crew will be able to trim trees that you've identified after your home assessment that need to be removed, and they will be able to do that for a fee. We have to cover the cost of bringing the crew up, but you know a lot of the problem that we have once you do trimming is what do you do with it. And thanks to the fire department, as you're aware, they have a slash pile. They burned it yesterday, so as long as conditions are good, Joe is going to be burning more frequently. But if we do a huge community effort over a couple of weekends, we'll have a lot of slash. We don't want it laying around as we approach the hotter, drier months, and Joe won't be able to burn. So we're bringing up the chipper crews, so start thinking about it. We're also going to provide a list of providers up here who, if you can't do your raking and cleanup, that they can do it for you. And Lori Hahn is going to follow up that day, the work day, with a spaghetti dinner at the fire department. Again, another fundraiser to support our fire department. So work during the day and come and have a spaghetti dinner and visit with your neighbors at night. Then on May 26th, we're going to have our annual block party. We are putting together a whole bunch of different ideas. And one of the critical things we're going to do this year is set up some poster children Firewise sites so that you can go around and take a look at what this should look like. We're also working with Chris Griggs at the Forest Service. He's going to come into Soldier Camp and Willow Canyon to help us and show us what we can do, what we need to do, and what we can do around our cabins on Forest Service property. We're looking for more volunteers. There's you all got your Firewise letter from our Firewise committee. There's going to be obviously articles every month in the Mountain Lemon in the Echoes. But please follow up, sign up for listserv, sign up for Nextdoor, and we encourage you to join the Mountain Lemon Homeowners Association so that you get the echoes and can follow up on all of the things that are happening up here. But this is about, we're talking more about what the Forest Service can do up here. This is about what we can do to protect our own cabins. in conjunction with working with the Forest Service. And thank you very much, Beth and Kerwin.
And just so you know, the general store does sell paper bags that you can put your pine needles in at cost. So they're not even charging you guys extra for what they're getting. So thank you, Phil, Carol, and Leanne. Larry Waldron's next.
Am I the only one wearing a cheater so far? I'm Larry Waldron, and I'm here to talk about cellular communications and issues on Mount Lemon. Microphone? How about that? It's a habit I don't have. Let me pin it here, and maybe it'll work. Okay. Can you hear me okay now? No? Let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Anyway, I'm not an advocate for Verizon. I'm not paid by Verizon, but I'm a Verizon customer. And briefly, let me just tell you what our history is, going way back. Remember the brick cell phones? I clip it to my lip. That was about 1990. They were big. The batteries didn't last very long. We've come a long way since then. And in today's communications, how many here don't have a cell phone in your family? Anybody not have a cell phone? Yeah, don't ask that question. So it is pretty important. And we go next slide, please. That's okay. That's fine. And I was going to read. Can you read it okay? There's according to a new study published by the Journal of Emergency Medicine, patients are more likely to survive when emergency services are called from a mobile phone rather than a landline. And this is a quote from the article. The use of mobile phones has an advantage of immediacy of access, in particular in situations where, such as road traffic incidents, outdoor accidents, and injuries, as well as incidents occurring in rural locations, where access to landlines is unlikely to be readily available. Remember about 2 summers ago, there were a couple ladies speeding down through the village, and they hit the corner of the curb over here, shot across the road, and went halfway up the tree, dead center on that big old tree in the creek. They had their 3 children with them. And they were drunk. And I believe it was Ruben who ran from his cabin all the way up to the fire station to get some help. No service. Pretty important. We don't do that. So next slide, please. And according to the FCC, 70% of all 911 calls are now made through cell phones. Not the case on Mount Lemon, because you can't get service to those places. Luann and I have driven up the mountain, and we've seen people stand along the roadways trying to get a cell phone signal. And they go from one place to another. Okay, and during Hurricane Harvey in 2017, just 4% of the 7,804 cell towers in Harvey's path experienced outages during the storm. That's less than 400 cell towers. And if you may wonder, you see shots of somebody riding a little skiff boat or a little motorized boat going down all these canal streets, taking pictures of homes. Fox News was using 2 cell phones to do that. One cell phone channel carried the video back to the company, and the other cell phone carried the voice, because he didn't have any support trucks, satellite trucks, to get in there. Okay, local emergency services. Mount Lemon Fire Department happens to have Verizon data terminals on their vehicles for transmission of medical data. So it's very important for them to have Verizon carrier. And they use, Verizon is one of the carriers they use to get people to come call in. They used to page them or text them. If you go out to an accident, we have a milepost 20. And with no service, you can't get a hold of these guys. If there's a fire or they need somebody for other kinds of medical emergency service, you can't raise them. For personal use, they're used for emergency contacts. Lost hikers try to use cell phones. With vehicle breakdowns along the road, you try to get cell service. Physical violence or accidents. And some of the first, oops, go back just 1 second. Some of the other uses we have are voice communications, networking, banking, shopping, social media, games, music, video, GPS mapping, and news and sports. Cell phones have a lot of use. And there's a website called notepage.net. And this is really interesting. I'm not going to take time to read it. But there are a lot of applications you can get, like FEMA. Thankfully, the FEMA app has a little bit of everything. This app can guide you through comprehensive emergency preparation and help you remain safe and find shelter during an emergency, making it an ultimate multi-purpose tool. They have other ones like triage. You can get on these websites and they'll have data for how to, if somebody's having a life injury and you can't get help, what can you do? And otherwise, you throw up your hands in frustration. There's SAS survival guide map, edible and medicinal apps. So if you're out in the woods and you're starving and you're lost, it'll tell you what kind of foods you can eat, what kind of plants you can eat. Yeah, that's true. There's just all kinds of apps on this site that you can download. And then if you're listening to the news in the summertime, especially the summertime, they'll say, while enjoying our neighboring forest, remember to carry plenty of water and a fully charged cell phone. Isn't that what you always hear? Remind you to take these two things if you go hiking. And up here, it's take plenty of water and a brick. You know? Go back one little bit. One page back. I want to show you something. Yeah, forward now. This one right there. This is a screenshot from my cell phone. I have a software package on there that gets you signal levels on different carriers. And this is Summerhaven right here. And the darker the signal, the darker the color, the higher the signal level. So right through Summerhaven, it's very faint. There's just nothing on Verizon down through the village. And similarly, you can look at AT&T, Sprint, and what's the other one? T-Mobile, and you'll see purple all the way through the whole village and along the highway. So that's just one. Verizon's really hurting right now because we can't get location to put a tower up. So that's why we're here, is to, what can we do? We need some help. We need to get, it's a real problem for us. We expect these million people to come up, and they're probably a lot like you. They all have cell phones, and we all depend on getting services for help. So anyway, what I have to say.
Our next issue is safety, and I want to ask a couple questions to Officer Conto, if you could stand, please. Now face to the right and face to the During the winter months, when we have a lot of snow, especially a couple years ago, the traffic up here was quite crazy. I mean, it was already at the base of the mountain, all the way to Catalina Highway, all the way back past Snyder. And can you describe for us the chaos that was going on up here?
Essentially, any time that we have snow days or holidays up here, we get a lot of people location. At that point in time, it was pretty much a revolving door. People would drive up and then drive back down, just because it was totally packed. And just the numbers of people the area could not handle.
What about the kids sledding close to the road?
That's something we're constantly battling, is the best snow seems to be close to the road, where people can get on their sleds and sled down the hill to the road, and oftentimes into the road. It's just an issue we have. We put a stop to it whenever we can.
Do you believe the same thing in the summer traffic as far as the amount of traffic flowing through here?
During the summers, it's not as bad usually as snow days unless we get holidays, and then it gets quite busy.
It was been brought up to us, first of all, because of the safety, that we need areas for parking, because what happens is people come up here, they look around, and then they go back down the highway. And for the businesses and everything else, it gets very complicated very quickly. So it's been proposed that we have two parking areas, one on over there by Sykes Knob, which is outlined right here, which supplies parking for 275 cars. And then, next slide, please. Right on North Sabino Canyon Parkway, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's two black areas on each side of the road that represent parking areas. Also, we could put a dumpster there, and we could also put an additional bathroom at that location. And that's something that we'll probably talk about in the very near future and try and get launched. The safety is a big concern up here. We got kids all over the place, running all over the place, and those are some issues that we have to take a real hard look at, especially during the winter time where there's a lot of snow. Yes?
My name is Andrew Johnson. My wife and I are residents here in County Cabot. Very, very quickly, it's always puzzled me that during the summer, there's extensive organized recreation for people who come up. Multiple campgrounds, places you can picnic, camp out, build a fire. But during the winter, there's nothing. So there's no place to go skiing, there's no organized place to go sledding. So what happens is everyone comes up, parks everywhere, and then goes to find a piece of land to sled. So I know it'd be a huge development issue, but something just to put in the back of our minds is to think about going forward, whether it be possible to create basically some organized winter recreation facilities up here.
Go to the previous slide.
Thank you.
Hang on. If you note over here on the left-hand side, it's hard to see, but it's called Winter Park. So there potentially can be some ways to develop, and that's ongoing and working with the Forest Service and trying to establish that type of relationship. So it has been thought of. It's something that's not at the very top of the chart, but we're pretty damn close to it. Next slide. Okay.
And our next speaker is Patrick Kavanaugh. I started meeting with Beth and Lucretia, Patrick, and the whole Pima County Board, and was like, I can't do this by myself. The businesses are busy, so that's when Bill and Michael and my dad and I got together. Now we're all best friends.
Actually, we're more than best friends, we're a subcommittee. So, this, on the business side, this sprang from the Pima County Small Business Commission that I mentioned earlier, which is an advisory body to the Board of Supervisors. And traditionally, we go out and we do outreach to rural communities, and we've done work in Ajo and Catalina, a number of different communities. Most of those projects were probably a couple of months in duration. And when we started meeting with the business folks up here on the mountain, the list of issues is so extensive and so complicated that we're pretty much in for the long haul. The commission as a whole has decided we will be working as long as it takes to get this taken care of. The first thing that we did after we formed the subcommittee was to put together a list of priorities of some of the issues, and you've certainly heard a number of them today: the parking, the visitors that are coming up the mountain. So we're looking at things like trash hauling, issues with Pima County Department of Transportation and vehicle counts, trying to come up with, a realistic tourism strategy that doesn't overwhelm the sensitive nature of this community, this mountain. So that was actually a very interesting point about the winter recreation. I think that's one of the things we'll be discussing in the subcommittee. Another thing that occurred to me that wasn't on the list, and it was when Bill was speaking, and he was talking about the education component. Well, the people that probably have the most one-on-one engagement with the visitors coming up the mountain is the business community. So maybe we can actually put together some kind of formalized education, program for people that are coming up. And the thing that rose to the top of the list of priorities that the subcommittee wanted to work on was fire. So we're certainly, as we go through our process, as we're looking for improvements, as we are looking for infrastructure in ways that we can help the business community, we have to be cognizant of how that's going to fit with the Forest Service strategies, the fire strategies, and that type of thing. So we're looking forward to this. We think we've got some good ideas, and we're very committed to the process. So thank you.
So you all heard that.
She always hands it off to me. Long-term initiative, federal, state, county, and community. I've been doing quite a bit of thinking and talking to a lot of people on the mountain about this. And we have a serious problem in the western states, there's no doubt about it, as far as the conditions of the forest, the fires, the expense, the loss of life. Something has to change, and change dramatically. So what I proposed, and it's just an initial thought, and there's going to have to go a lot of work behind it, is to propose a bill to go through the House and the Senate. And that bill would somehow entail, and we're going to hand it off to you, Gail, but that bill would entail that Mount Lemmon becomes an actual federal study for 5 years, to where we put money into prevention, number one, and get enough money from the federal government to go ahead and clean up our mountain and reduce the risk of crown fires. But in addition to that, destination development. I see a point in time where the Forest Service, if they're allowed to lease property and get the funds from that, instead of the funds going to Washington, D.C. in the black hole, go directly to the local Forest Service so they can hire additional people, so they can provide the services that they desperately want to do for the community and for the mountain. A lot of other things. There's a lot of talent up on this mountain. I had a conversation with what I call a technical nerd, and he was talking about new technology, how to spot fires when they are initially started, having infrared cameras and a variety of other things to assist the Forest Service in reacting to forest fires immediately instead of 45 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours down the road when a fire initially starts. So there's a lot of activity. That this community is the most dynamic community I've ever seen in my life. And they're good people. They cross all sections of jobs and a variety of other things, and we all pitch in. We all roll up our sleeves to try and help one another. And I see that relationship being developed with you folks. That we work together and we find out, we think out of the box. And we try to develop a new strategy. And if it's successful, I know we'll have some failures, but we'll have some successes too. At the end of that 5-year study, and we've already Tufts University has offered up their help, and University of Arizona their help, to try and coordinate and see a change in a forest from an unhealthy forest to a healthy forest and a developing community. One thing that came from the Economic Council that really stunned me, one of the individuals told me, said, if you don't grow, you will die. So we have no other choice. And that's a collaboration between, like I said, the federal, state, county, and community. We have to do this, and hopefully we can, over the next few months, formulate some sort of bill that we can do that. Jenny?
Okay, so we are open for, what time is it? We have 15 minutes. Who has the most important question? Well, no, because Jeannie Mayer. Jeannie Mayer. She has a small business. Here, come closer.
Hi, my name's Jean. Problem trash. I know we talked about a dumpster, but we have a small business. It's a trailer that comes up and down, usually on weekends. On one snow weekend, we'll have people coming up with bags of trash with diapers, and ain't gonna happen. I clean up a truckload of trash after 1 day of business. I have an agreement. I rent the property from the owner, and people come and sled, and a lot of injuries there too. But the abuse of, when I don't take the trash, I just say, just throw it on the ground, I'll get it later on. There's just no place to do it, and they don't take it with them. Again, maybe signage, education, and bilingual. So, and that's just that one lot that I'm talking about. If you walk down the sidewalk and maybe look in here and go down and just start looking in the weeds, you're gonna see beer bottles and sleds that are broken up. So, and who takes care of that again? The citizens of Summerhaven.
So, Patrick, we did bring that to Patrick at one of our board meetings, and so Patrick, we are working with that. So Patrick will say.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that came up. And so the first movement on that is we've asked the business community to kind of formalize their relationship and form a nonprofit. In addition to making them eligible for grant funding for infrastructure and that kind of thing, I think it's going to put them in a better position to negotiate a bulk trash rate up here. And maybe we can get more points of trash disposal. After we had that initial conversation, I went and talked to my boss, Chuck Huckleberry, the Pima County Administrator, and said, would you be willing to come into that contract with the community center and the other county buildings that we have up here? And he's all in. So we are trying to do what we can on that, but I agree with you, it's going to also be an education process, so we will be looking at that.
So I'm understanding that the locals will be paying the bulk rate, or will the county or whatnot help cover?
I think we'll get a better rate with the county and the locals paying together. But I mean, the county doesn't, provide trash service any place in the county.
Okay, just to clarify, that this problem that I'm talking about is particular to the people coming up, visitors that are not locals.
Right, and what we're looking at initially is that more trash points, more trash hauling, and an education program.
So we're working on it. Okay. Any other questions? Carol? And that was a suggestion. Carol said for every person that picks up a full bag of trash, they get a bag of popcorn. Then who's going to take it down is the problem. Any other questions? Dennis?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on the suggestion about having a winter play area that's designated because it affects both safety, as Dana's pointed out, as well as the litter issue. How do you proceed with that? Is that a Forest Service issue? Is that a county issue? Is it both? Anybody has any suggestions of how we can move forward with some sort of action on that? I would appreciate it.
Hang on, Dad's got 2 cents. Okay, Bob Zimmerman?
It's a difficult solution, but when I was in high school, we skied over near Bigelow, and there was a nice area there. It would take a new person to be in charge, and they'd have to charge money, and there'd be something there. But it's gentle, and it'd be good sledding and that kind of stuff, and it would get the people in an area that would take them off the roads, which would be very good. The trouble with trash bins is you need signs to go with them because they will throw the trash at the trash bin. We saw that happen up here when the women's club put in trash bins all around. Maybe. The other sad issue was the closing of that little building down there at the bottom of the mountain, near the bottom of the mountain, which stopped everybody and educated them and gave them information and charged them a little money. I wish that could reopen again. It would really help a lot of things that we need done.
We have one more, Chuck. We have one more. Wait, hang on, Chuck raised his hand first, sorry.
Yeah, this is for Bob, and we've camped all over the West. A lot of high elevation campgrounds because you used to only be able to get away from work in the summer. Every single one where there was any significant amount of people, every little village in the high elevation areas of the West used to have 1 or 2 sawmills. We have no sawmill, as I remember, it was forced to close in '86. During the '80s, everything was multiple use. And I know that the Forest Service and Department of Agriculture throughout the country made an awful lot of money that helped subsidize all the cleanup, the thinning, etc., and forest management. Now, I don't think there's much of anything. The forest industry has been devastated by the federal government restrictions, as I understand it. Is there any chance at all we can get back to multiple use and use our own resources up here and maybe save the taxpayers some money?
And so who's that directed to? Oh, this fellow right here, lucky you.
Good morning, my name is Matt Cottarelli. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Arizona Commerce Authority. We're the state's economic development agency. We've actually been working very closely with Mr. Whitney on looking at ways how we can bring the forestry industry back to Arizona and better manage our own forests. So there are conversations being had. It's swimming upstream at the moment, but we've got the right people at the table, and we hope to see some progress in the next year. We are also trying to engage our small businesses and our rural communities more. So again, most of you probably hadn't heard of the Arizona Commerce Authority, but look us up. It's azcommerce.com. We're here to help, and happy to be here. Senator Griffin was the one who called me last night and said, hey, you got to be here. So drove down from Phoenix, and it's beautiful. So thank you.
If salmon can swim upstream. Bill. So if salmon can swim upstream, we sure as heck can try, right? So Bill is going to finalize this quickly, and I do want to note that if we're out of here before 12 o'clock, you owe me.
12:10. Okay, 12:10. There you go, Jeff.
So I'm standing between you and ha 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 ha. Okay. Thank you for including us today. Thank you for being such an incredibly responsible community. Thank you for having us up. You guys are demonstrating what Senator Griffin has heard me say in other locations inside her legislative area. This really is government in action. I love the idea of a federal, state, county, local concept. The best friend that I have in the state legislature is Senator Griffin. And she represents you all incredibly well, and she has been a terrific supporter for the programs by statute that we're provided an opportunity to assist with. We have a number of opportunities to participate with you all based on the presentations we saw today. Bob, Bill, all of the speakers, the county, the residents here, Kerwin, you and your folks, the county sheriff, the county government. It's an amazing place where you all live. And a lot of people are drawn here, and it's a real opportunity, and I could not be happier. Bill just asked me if I'd like to say a couple of things, and I said I'd be delighted. You really are the best example that I've seen in Arizona of local action. You've been tested by a number of wildfires. You understand your issues. You're more than willing to step up and participate and contribute to a solution. It's got to start with you all. The governor, I briefed the governor yesterday. We had a press conference following that. Been privileged to be your state forester now for a little over 3 years. It's the fourth time I've briefed the governor on fire season. We did it far earlier this year because we do know it's going to be a bad year. And I'm fortunate to know Kerwin and Steve Miranda and Acting Ranger Dykstra. And, I was up here on the Bullock Fire and the Aspen Fire and the Burrow Fire. I was a Fed back then. And, the synopsis that you provided this morning was spot on. Yes. I'm going to steal it. And I think Senator Griffin, I think an awful lot of things we've discussed over the years were right on that page, but extremely concise and accurate. I wanted to introduce a couple of my folks. We've got Bill Boyd and Dia Funka here with me today. Bill is a step up here where they can see you, Dia. She's brand new. I stole her from our dispatch center. She was our intel officer the last couple of seasons. And Dia's our new prevention lead person for the state. And she and Sally are going to be working closely together. Firewise is a shared opportunity between NFPA, the USDA Forest Service, and the National Association of State Foresters. And it's not thousands of state foresters, there's 50 of us. I am your state forester. We are committed to Firewise. We will be back. I'd love to come back and make some additional presentations. We are committed to partnering with you all. Thank you so much. Dia does have one announcement.
Please join us for the 3rd annual WUI and Firewise Summit. It will be held April 27th and 28th in another mountain community, Pine Top, at the Honda Conference Center. We'll talk about Firewise, wildfire awareness with a variety of agencies, cooperators, etc. The more the merrier. For additional details, I am happy to send out email, phone calls. We'll see you there. Thank you.
Well, one important guest I want to talk about shortly. She really is in our corner. She's a person that I trust emphatically. She's the type of person that will get things done. The Honorable Senator Gail Griffin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As I said, I don't have much of a voice, but thank you for being here. It's always an honor to come out to the district to meet the real people. We are in session right now, so I sometimes get home on the weekends, and we should be there through April. But in the meantime, Jeff and I work real close on, we formed the department, and we gave him an additional charge of water. So we want to talk about water and how we can create additional wet water in our rural areas as well. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'll stick around. I have some cards that I'll be happy to hand to you and answer any questions that you may have. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
We're going to try to have this type of meeting at least biannually, and hopefully we can progress forward. And I made it at noon. Thank you all for coming.
Is there a chance to have you stop by so we can kind
Are we
of
done?
outline what it is you're needing? The bell tower is going to need something very soon when it starts, but I'd like to look at what we have. So we're home today, and just give me a call or whatever. If you want me up here, I usually get up here Thursday afternoon. So, okay?
I know. Here you go. It's still on.